Hello there. Welcome to A Course in Miracles 365 Awakening to Love. I'm your host, Tomas Garza. And as always, thank you for joining me here today on the network. And thank you all for your practice. That's what I want to say leading off. This is the best offering that you can give the world, yourself, the people that are close to you, the people that are not physically close to you, whom you don't know in the world and may never meet. This is the best thing that you can give is your practice, your decision to choose love, right? Choosing love, that's the best gift that we can give. And thank you all for tuning in, for all of your comments, for the loves, the hearts, the likes. Yeah, all of that. That means a great deal to me that this programming is of benefit and value to you. So I love it. I love showing up here and sharing my experience with all of you. So whether you're catching this live or on the replay, thank you for joining me. All right, so we've got a lot to talk about here in the workbook for students. Now, if you're just joining this live stream, it's been going for a couple of months, and wherever you are, you're right where you're meant to be. I will tell you right now that you are not behind. A number of people say that when it comes to A Course in Miracles. And as you may know, there are groups, there are study groups that run constantly. There might be some in your area in person, there might be some online. There are all kinds of different options for engaging in a community and a group dynamic with this material. It lends itself to this very well. So number one, you're not alone. And number two, you're exactly where you're meant to be. People often say to me, well, I'm behind. Well, it's really easy to say that to ourselves. And then it's really easy to justify not doing anything, right? How many of us have done this? Every hand goes up, right? Myself included. How many of us have done this in our lives where we said, well, the group's already started, so I'll catch it next time? Well, the workbook has 365 lessons. It's going to take over a year to go all the way through on this live stream. So what I recommend is that you don't wait a calendar year to embark on your own journey of awakening. Now, because you're watching this, you're already on this. Okay. I mention all of this about our limiting beliefs because they're constantly coming up. Spiritual practice will bring that up by design. That's a good thing. And we have ideas like the ideas in the workbook for students to help us. We have meditation to help us. We have prayer to help us. We have communities of people to help us. We have networks like Enlightened World Network to help us. There are so many tools at your disposal that are available to you right now, especially with 21st century technology. All that's required is for each of us to show up. So I hope that whatever that looks like for you, that you do that. You may do that today. We're on lesson 53 here. So wherever you are in the workbook, or even if you're not following along with this, we're talking universal spirituality here, and it applies to everyone. Hence the word universal, right? So lesson 53 continues with a review of the first several lessons in the workbook that we've covered here on the live stream that you may have covered, and you may have done this several different times in your life. I know that there are some of you on this network, on this channel, who have been a course student for 20 or 30 years. I have not. It's been something that's been the focal point of my spirituality for about 8 years now. So this is I'm familiar with the material, and you may be as well. So you'll know that there's always a good time to uncover something new. some new layer of understanding. So let's go through these ideas because there's 5 of them each day for the next several days until this review period ends at lesson 60. So lesson 53. So the lessons are: my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. That's the first one. My meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. We looked yesterday at the idea that my thoughts do not mean anything. Why do they not mean anything? Well, they're not the thoughts that I think with God. It's not just me, it's all of us, you as well. None of our thoughts mean anything because they're not the thoughts that we think with God. Therefore, they're not our real thoughts. Again, it is not required that you have a full intellectual understanding of this. These ideas are intended to be practiced because what we're after is the experience of the idea, not necessarily the intellectual understanding. Now, our rational intellectual minds, we call them rational, I think they're insane, right? Would they want to go right to figuring it all out, and millions of questions get asked. The workbook only asks us to practice the day's idea. It doesn't matter if you actively resist it. It doesn't matter if you believe it. That's absolutely fine. I mean, if you do and it speaks to your experience, great. But this is saying it's not required that you do. Just work with the idea. Our thoughts about yesterday's lunch, tomorrow's lunch, about how the stars were really beautiful last night, about, I don't know, right? About what's going on in the park across the street from me, which is, well, not much. There's just a little breeze blowing. I mean, these are some of the thoughts that are going through my head right now, even while I'm on the live stream talking to all of you worldwide. Yeah, our thoughts don't mean anything, really, do they? And they're just one, if we look at them, it's one random thing after another, all strung together. They don't seem to come from anywhere, nor does there seem to be any logical or concrete, rational order to them. They just come up. Now, these show us a meaningless world. Our meaningless thoughts show us a meaningless world, and it upsets us. This is the next idea. I am upset because I see a meaningless world, naturally. Yeah. The fact that we're constantly stressing ourselves out in life should disturb us. That is a disturbance that forces us in the end, right? That enables us to engage in spiritual practice. We sometimes need this in the world, right? We need to sometimes hit rock bottom, which looks differently for everybody, but there has to be a level of frustration for most of us that we reach before we will take the necessary steps to change our minds. I think about your own personal stubbornness. I think about my own and the ways that I actively resisted what is good for all of us. In other words, spiritual practice. And I've been meditating for 36 years. I still experience this resistance. So even someone that's been practicing a lifetime needs to maintain constant vigilance. So if people that have been practicing a certain tradition all of their lives need to retain constant vigilance, so do we, right? Because it does naturally upset us to see a meaningless world. We search for meaning, don't we? As human beings, we search for meaning. I mean, this is what's driving us to do that, is this experience. A meaningless world, next idea, engenders fear. Of course, if you're upset, you're in fear. It's not love, so it's fear. If you take nothing else from the study of A Course in Miracles, take the idea that we can choose love or fear. It's worth repeating as many times on this live stream as is necessary. As many times. I'm repeating this as many times as I'm called to repeat it. Why? Because I don't know who's out there watching right now. I don't know who in the world is catching the replay of this live stream. So it is up to me to just teach. A meaningless world engenders fear. Right? If you're experiencing frustration with the world, if you wish that it were different, those are fear thoughts. Yeah, they're fear thoughts. They're not loving thoughts. This is the next idea. A meaningless world engenders fear. Next idea. This, by the way, is lesson 14 in the workbook. God did not create a meaningless world. All right, so I want to spend the rest of the time on these next two ideas here, which are 14 and 15 in the workbook. 14, God did not create a meaningless world. We did. We made it. I mean, think about it. Human beings invented all kinds of layers of complexity. We invented the economic systems that govern the world today. We invented the political systems that govern the world today. All of the stuff that appears to run the show. We invented the internet. God did not create a meaningless world. People often think, okay, God, why? Why? It's a good question, actually. Why did you place me in this? Well, God didn't place you in this. This is a liberating idea. It actually requires us to take ownership of our own power, which we should be very happy to do. We made this, we can unmake it. God, being perfect love, did not create a world full of frustration and pain and war and pandemics and genocide and segregated societies. He didn't do that. Perfect love is not capable of doing that. Think about it. Does this completely fly in the face of what you were told growing up? If it does, fantastic. All that anyone's asking is that you just consider this idea. God did not create a meaningless world. Last idea. My thoughts are images that I have made. My thoughts are images that I have made. Whatever we see reflects our thoughts. That's the way it works. It's not the other way around. We are not, therefore, victims of a world that's savage and cruel. Placed here, we don't know why. Yeah, that's not it. Our thoughts create and cause our reality. So what we're seeing reflects our thoughts. If you are seeing beauty, that reflects loving thoughts. If you are seeing pain and frustration and people attacking people, then those are the result of your fear-based thoughts. Now, we see both in the world, don't we? Every day. One moment to the next, it's like a yo-yo, isn't it? Sometimes it's exhausting, actually, if you think about it, because we're having a beautiful thought and we're in the energy of love. Then we're judging somebody. We're in the energy of frustration or hatred or fear. We get annoyed and we get carried away in it. Why? We're habitually attenuated to it. Spiritual practice is habitually attenuating ourselves to love. It's a reversal of the way the world sees things. And our thoughts are indeed images that we have made. When we see pandemics, when we see oppression, when we see people attacking people for their choices, when we see confusion and fear, when we see political systems behaving badly, as political systems will do, no matter where in the world you find yourself, know that those are the result of people's fear-based thoughts. We are just as capable of having loving thoughts. So we all have a question to answer, and that is, which would we rather have? And thinking about it, especially watching a live stream on this channel, it should be pretty obvious, right, that we would prefer the loving thoughts, yet we act and behave completely differently, don't we? We choose fear thoughts again and again and again. It's all about our being honest with ourselves here. It really is. It's all about our willingness, and the Course talks about just a little willingness that's required of us to achieve full awakening. Full awakening requires just a little willingness to see things differently, a willingness to show up and choose love right now in the present moment. That's all that's asked of us. Really, that's all we can bring to the table, because the past and the future aren't here. They're not here right now. This is where creation happens right now, in the moment. This is not just something that every spiritual teacher says because it sounds cool. It's the way it works. So if you think it sounds cool, well, nice. I appreciate that. All right. So we'll continue for the next several days reviewing the past lessons from the workbook. And if you're following along, I, as always, invite you to read the commentary and to practice these lessons as the workbook suggests that we do it. Now, I mean, I use the word suggest because none of this is required. It's a self-study course, but you would do very well in your life to take these ideas and apply them. Just contemplate them. Because even if all you do is think about your own creative power, which, by the way, is the same as the power of God, our real thoughts are the thoughts we think with God, with, then that is of great value. All of this is of tremendous value, no matter what your spiritual tradition is. So let's see who's joining us here live today. And if you're catching the replay, feel welcome to leave comments here. Again, this is so much fun for me to be able to interact with you all live. And let's just see here. Well, Bernadette and Robert, hello, how are you? Yeah, and Bernadette, you raise a very, very good point here in the comments. So as quickly as thoughts come up, we can change them. Yeah, exactly. That's just it, right? That should be something that we take a lot of joy in. This should be heartening. It should be lovingly heartening and exciting that we made all this. Okay, all right, so be it. We can change our minds right now. We can unmake it. We can shine light into the world. We can extend love. We can do that. We can do that just as quickly as we've made a decision to see ourselves as a separate entity, walled off and competing with one another, judging one another, all of that. We can see unity. We can experience it. We can choose to experience it right now. Absolutely right. Great point. Yes, I love it. Well, and thank you all, the rest of you, for tuning in here and for joining. I will happily answer further questions here on the comment stream, and I thank you all for tuning in today. It's so much fun for me to be here sharing this experience with all of you. So again, thank you for tuning in to A Course in Miracles 365, and I will see you back here again tomorrow.